Kang Do-hyun stood at the observation window of Horizon's Edge Station, watching the stars drift slowly past. He was 32 years old, a junior diplomatic attaché, and he was very far from home. Earth was somewhere behind him, lost among a billion points of light. He did not feel homesick. He had no home to miss. The orphanage where he grew up had closed years ago. The foster families had been kind but temporary. The only constant in his life was his work. The station hummed with activity. Delegates from 12 different species walked its corridors, each group keeping careful distance from the others. The galactic concord was not built on friendship. It was built on fear. Fear of war. Fear of extinction. Fear of each other. Humans were the newest members. They had joined only 40 years ago, and the other species still watched them with suspicion. Humans were emotional, unpredictable, dangerous in ways that older civilizations found difficult to understand. Do-hyun understood this. He had spent his career learning to be calm, quiet, and invisible. He did his job well. He caused no problems. He made no enemies. This was how a human survived among the stars. His communicator beeped. A message from Ambassador Ji-won, his superior. Meeting room 7. Immediately, Do-hyun walked through the curved corridors, passing groups of aliens who barely glanced at him. The toHFY, with their 4 arms and stone-like skin. The Melthari, who communicated through color changes in their translucent bodies. And the Volanthi. He slowed his steps when he saw them. 3 figures in flowing silver robes, their skin a pale blue that seemed to glow from within. Patterns of light moved across their faces and hands, shifting like flames made of starlight. They were beautiful in a way that made his chest tight. And they were untouchable. Everyone knew about the Volanthi. They could read minds through physical contact. A single touch, and they would know your every thought, every secret, every hidden shame. Their royalty were considered sacred. To touch them without permission was death. Do-hyun kept his eyes down and walked past. Ambassador Ji-won was waiting in meeting room 7. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had served the diplomatic corps for 30 years and had no patience for fools. Do-hyun, she said. Sit down. He sat. The Volanthi Emperor is bringing his daughter to the summit. Princess Yuna, 3rd in line to the throne. Ji-won slid a datapad across the table. You will be part of the security detail for the reception tonight. Do-hyun looked at the image on the screen. The princess had the same silver-blue skin as the others, but her features were softer, younger. The patterns on her skin formed delicate spirals around her eyes. She looked tired, he thought. Tired and sad. I understand, he said. Do you? Ji-won leaned forward. Let me be clear. You will not approach the Volanthi delegation. You will not speak to them unless directly addressed. And you will never, under any circumstances, touch any member of the royal family. The punishment is death, and we cannot protect you from it. Do you understand? Yes, Ambassador. Good. Dismissed. The reception hall was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers floated in the air, held by invisible fields of energy. Tables overflowed with food from a dozen worlds. Music played from hidden speakers, a strange melody that had no beginning and no end. Do-hyun stood near the wall, watching. He wore his formal uniform, dark blue with silver buttons. He felt uncomfortable. He always felt uncomfortable at events like this. Too many people. Too much noise. Too many chances for something to go wrong. The Volanthi delegation entered, and the room fell quiet. Emperor Taiho walked first, tall and stern, his robes dragging behind him like a river of silver. His advisors followed, then his guards. And finally, his daughter. Princess Yuna moved like water. Her gown was pale gold, and the patterns on her skin pulsed gently with each step. She did not smile. She did not look at anyone. Her eyes were fixed on some distant point that only she could see. Do-hyun found himself staring. There was something about her that pulled at him. Something lonely. Something familiar. He looked away. It was not his place to stare at royalty. The reception continued. Speeches were made. Toasts were offered. Do-hyun remained at his post, silent and watchful. He noticed things that others missed. The toHFY ambassador was angry about something. The Malthari delegation was nervous. And the princess, standing beside her father's throne, was desperately bored. He almost smiled. Even princesses got bored at parties. Then everything changed. It happened so fast that later, Do-hyun could barely remember the details. A flash of movement near the stage. A shout. Someone had a weapon. Guards were running, but they were too far away. The assassin was raising his arm, pointing at the emperor. No, not at the emperor. At the princess. Do-hyun did not think. He ran. He crossed the space between them in seconds, moving faster than he had ever moved in his life. He grabbed the princess around the waist and pulled her behind a pillar, just as the energy blast screamed past. It hit the wall where she had been standing, leaving a smoking black crater. For a moment, everything was still. Do-hyun was pressed against the pillar, breathing hard, his arm wrapped around the princess. He could feel the warmth of her body through her gown. His hand was on her bare arm. Her bare arm. Horror flooded through him. He had touched her. He had touched the princess. The punishment was death. But he could not move. He could not let go. More shots were firing. More screams. The assassin was still out there. 3 seconds. His hand stayed on her arm for 3 seconds. Then the guards arrived, pulling the assassin down, securing the room. Do-hyun finally released the princess and stepped back. His heart was pounding so hard, he could barely hear. The room was silent. Everyone was staring at him. The Volanthi guards raised their weapons, pointing at his chest. Ambassador Ji-won's face was white with shock. Do-hyun prepared to die, but Princess Yuna raised her hand. The guards hesitated. "Stop," she said. Her voice was soft but clear. This human meant no harm. Her eyes met his. They were deep and silver, like pools of moonlight. Something passed between them, something he could not name. In those 3 seconds of contact, she had felt everything inside him. His fear, his loneliness, his desperate need to protect her, not for glory or reward, but simply because she was in danger. No one had ever felt such things from another being. No alien mind she had touched had ever been so open, so genuine, so completely without agenda. Emperor Taeho stepped forward, his face like stone. "Take the human to detention. We will decide his fate later." Guards grabbed Do-hyun's arms. He did not resist. He kept his eyes on the princess as they dragged him away. She stood perfectly still, watching him go. The patterns on her skin were flickering in a strained rhythm. Her attendants exchanged worried glances. They had served her for decades. They had never seen her markings move like that. One of them, an old scholar named Counselor Yoonji, felt her breath catch in her throat. She recognized that pattern. She had seen it once before, in ancient texts that no one read anymore. It was the pattern of fascination, the first sign of a bond beginning to form. The princess did not notice. She was too busy trying to understand what she had felt in the human's heart. Warmth. Genuine warmth. Protection without expectation. Kindness without calculation. She had touched thousands of minds in her life. Politicians, nobles, servants, spies. None of them had felt like him. As the guards took Do-hyun away, Princess Yuna made a quiet decision. She did not know what it meant yet. She did not know where it would lead. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She needed to see this human again. The detention cell was small and white. There was a bed, a toilet, and nothing else. No windows. No decorations. No hope. toHFY sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. He had been here for 6 hours. No one had come to see him. No one had told him what would happen next. He assumed he would be executed. The Volanti were very clear about their laws. He was not afraid. That surprised him. He had expected to feel terror, but instead he felt only a strange calm. He had saved her life. Whatever happened next, that fact would not change. He thought about her eyes. Silver and deep, like looking into forever. He thought about the feeling of her arm under his hand, warm and soft. He thought about the look on her face when she stopped the guards. She had protected him. A princess had protected a human. That had never happened before. Why? In another part of the station, Princess Yuna was asking herself the same question. She sat in her private chambers, surrounded by luxury she did not notice. Silk curtains, floating crystal lamps, a bed large enough for 10 people. None of it mattered. All she could think about was those 3 seconds. When a Volanti touched another being, they did not just feel emotions. They experienced them. They lived inside them, like swimming in an ocean made of feeling. Most minds were murky, complicated, full of hidden currents and dangerous depths. Politicians thought one thing and felt another. Nobles smiled while their hearts burned with jealousy. Even her own family was a maze of secrets and lies. But this human, this Kang Do-yoon, his mind had been clear. Crystal clear, like water from a mountain spring. She had felt his fear, yes, but it was not fear for himself. He had been afraid for her. He had been thinking only of saving her, even though he knew the punishment for touching her. And beneath the fear, she had felt something else. Something that still made her chest ache when she remembered it. Loneliness. Deep, old loneliness. The kind that came from years of being alone. Years of having no one to hold. No one to trust. No one to love. She knew that loneliness. She had felt it herself, every day of her life. But she had never felt it from another being before. There was a knock at her door. Counselor Yoonji entered, her old face creased with worry. Your Highness, your father has scheduled the human's trial for tomorrow morning. The punishment will almost certainly be death. Yuna closed her eyes. I want to see him. Yoonji's breath caught. Your Highness, that would be highly irregular. Your father would not approve. I do not care what my father approves. I wish to speak with the human. Arrange it. The old counselor hesitated. She had served Yuna since the princess was a child. She had never seen her this determined about anything. May I ask why, Your Highness? Yuna opened her eyes. The patterns on her skin pulsed slowly, thoughtfully. Because I need to understand. I need to know if what I felt was real. Yoonji bowed. I will arrange it. 1 hour later, Yuna entered the detention block. Guards followed her, but she ordered them to wait outside. She entered the visiting room alone. Do-yoon was already there, sitting at a metal table. His wrists were bound with energy cuffs. He looked tired. Dark circles under his eyes. Wrinkles in his uniform. But when he saw her, he straightened his spine and met her gaze directly. Most people looked away from Volanti royalty. They were afraid of what they might reveal. But this human looked at her like she was simply a person. Princess, he said quietly, I apologize for what I did. I know the law. I accept my punishment. She sat down across from him. You apologize for saving my life? I apologize for touching you without permission. It was wrong, and yet you would do it again. He did not hesitate. Yes, why? Because you were in danger. That is the only thing that mattered. Yuna studied him for a long moment. His face was plain. Not handsome, but not ugly. Just ordinary. Human. But his eyes were kind. Genuinely kind. Not the practiced kindness of courtiers who wanted something from her. You know that I felt your mind when you touched me, she said. I know what you were feeling in those seconds. I know. Your thoughts were remarkably pure. Most beings would have felt confusion, regret, self-preservation. You felt only concern for my safety. She leaned forward slightly. That is extremely unusual. Do-Hyun was silent for a moment. I do not think about myself very much. There is not much to think about. What do you mean? He shrugged. It was such a human gesture. Simple and honest. I have no family. No close friends. No one who would miss me if I disappeared. When I saw the assassin pointing at you, I did not think about what would happen to me. I thought only about stopping him. Yuna felt something twist inside her chest. This man had risked his life for her, knowing he would die for it, and he spoke about himself as if he did not matter at all. Everyone matters, she said softly. He smiled. It was a sad smile, but genuine. That is kind of you to say, princess. But I have lived long enough to know that is not true. Some people matter more than others. That is simply how the universe works. And you believe you do not matter much. I believe I matter less than you. You are a princess. You are important to billions of people. I am a junior diplomat who has no family and no name worth remembering. My death would change nothing. Your death would have changed everything. He spread his bound hands. The math is simple. Yuna stared at him. She had touched thousands of minds. Politicians who believed they were the center of the universe. Nobles who thought their bloodlines made them superior. Even her own family, who carried the weight of their importance like armor. This human believed, with complete sincerity, that he was worth nothing, and yet he had saved her anyway. She reached across the table and took his hand. The guards outside would have stopped her if they could see. The council would have been horrified. Her father would have been furious. But she did not care. She needed to feel him again. She needed to know if that clarity was real. His emotions poured into her like sunlight. Surprise at her touch. Concern for her reputation. And beneath it all, that same aching loneliness, that same quiet sadness, that same stubborn warmth that refused to die no matter how much the universe hurt him. You feel everything, she whispered. So deeply. So strongly. How do you survive it? He looked at their joined hands. His fingers were rough and warm. Hers were smooth and cool. We do not always survive it, he admitted. Humans break. We shatter. We fall apart. But we also heal. We put ourselves back together, piece by piece, and we keep going. That is what we do. We keep going. Why? Because giving up is worse. Because somewhere, sometime, something might be worth the pain. He met her eyes. I did not believe that for a long time. But when I saw you about to die, I felt something I had not felt in years. Purpose. A reason to act. A reason to care. He smiled again, still sad. Even if it only lasted 3 seconds, it was worth it. Yuna released his hand. Her heart was beating strangely. The patterns on her skin were moving in ways she could not control. You are not going to die, she said. Princess? She stood up. Her voice was firm now, certain. You saved my life. You acted without any expectation of reward. You are the most honest being I have ever touched. She walked toward the door. I am going to speak with my father. You will not be executed. You cannot change Volante law for a human. She stopped at the door and looked back at him. Watch me, 2 hours later, an announcement was made. The human Kang Do-yoon would not be executed. By order of Princess Yuna, he was instead assigned to serve as her personal diplomatic liaison for the remainder of the summit. The decision sent shockwaves through the station. Other species whispered in corners. The Volanthi court was in an uproar. Ambassador Ji-won nearly collapsed when she heard the news. And in his cell, Do-hyun stared at the message on the screen and wondered what he had gotten himself into. The princess had saved him. Now he had to figure out why. The news spread through the station like fire. A human assigned to the Volanthi princess. It was impossible. It was scandalous. It was the most interesting thing that had happened at the Concord Summit in 100 years. Do-hyun tried to ignore the stares. He walked through the corridors in his new formal uniform, silver and blue to match Volanthi colors. Everywhere he went, aliens stopped and pointed. Some laughed. Some whispered. Some just stared with open hostility. He kept his head down and kept walking. The princess had given him specific duties. He was to attend all diplomatic meetings at her side. He was to advise her on human customs and perspectives. He was to be available whenever she needed him. At first, he thought this was just politics. A way to save face after the assassination attempt. A gesture of mercy that would make the Volanthi look generous. He was wrong. Yuna genuinely wanted him there. She asked him questions constantly. What did humans think about trade agreements? How did humans handle conflicts between families? What did it feel like to age so quickly, to live such short lives? Do-hyun answered as honestly as he could. He found that honesty was easier with her. She could feel his emotions anyway, so lying was pointless. And somehow, talking to her did not feel like work. It felt like talking to an old friend. "You are very patient," Yuna said one evening. They were sitting in her private garden, surrounded by flowers from a dozen worlds. "Other beings grow tired of my questions." "I like your questions," Do-hyun admitted. "They make me think about things I usually ignore." "Like what?" "Like what it means to be human. I have spent my whole career trying to be less human, quieter, calmer, more acceptable to other species." He touched one of the flowers, a delicate thing with petals like glass. "You are the first person who seems interested in what humans actually are." Yuna was silent for a moment. The patterns on her skin shifted slowly, like clouds moving across the sky. "My people are afraid of emotions," she said finally. "We can feel what others feel, so we learn to hide what we feel ourselves. We built walls around our hearts. We created rules and rituals to keep everyone at a safe distance." She looked at him. "But you do not have walls. Your heart is completely open. I have never encountered anything like it." "Sometimes I wish I had walls," Do-hyun said quietly. "Being open hurts, does it?" "Yes, when you feel everything, you cannot choose what to feel. Sadness comes whether you want it or not. Loneliness comes whether you want it or not. Pain comes whether you want it or not." He looked down at his hands. "I have felt a lot of pain in my life. If I could close myself off, stop feeling so much, maybe things would be easier. But you have not." "No, I cannot. This is how humans are made. We break, but we do not close." He smiled slightly. "Maybe that is our curse. Or maybe it is our gift. I have never been sure." Yuna reached out and touched his hand. The gesture was becoming familiar now. She did it often, just brief touches, feeling his emotions like a musician listening to music. "It is a gift," she said softly. "I am certain of it." But not everyone agreed with the princess. Lord Hyunsik was one of the oldest nobles in the Volanthi court. He had served 3 emperors and expected to serve a 4th. He was tall and cold, with patterns on his skin that never seemed to move at all. He hated humans. He made no secret of it. In council meetings, he spoke about them with open disgust. Primitive creatures. Emotional savages. Barely evolved from animals. And now a human was at the side of the princess. A human was touching her hand. A human was making her patterns flicker and dance in ways that made the court historians whisper nervously. Hyun-sik saw weakness. He saw opportunity. He began to gather allies. Other nobles who shared his views. Politicians who wanted the princess disgraced. Rivals who hoped to see his own daughter, Lady Minji, rise in Yuna's place. The princess has lost her judgment, he told them in secret meetings. This human has corrupted her somehow. We must expose this before it goes too far. His plan was simple. He would humiliate the princess in public. He would force the human to break protocol, to reveal his primitive nature. And when the scandal erupted, he would be there to pick up the pieces. The opportunity came at a formal banquet. Representatives from all 12 species gathered in the Great Hall. Speeches were made about unity and cooperation. But beneath the polite words, old hatred simmered. Hyun-sik waited until the speeches were finished. Then he stood and addressed the room. We have heard much about cooperation tonight, he said, his voice smooth and cold. But I wonder if true cooperation is possible when some species are so different from others. When some species are so controlled by their emotions that they cannot be trusted. The room grew quiet. Everyone knew what he was talking about. Humans, for example, Hyun-sik continued. They feel so deeply that they cannot control themselves. They act on impulse. They break rules without thinking. He turned to look at Yuna. Some have even suggested that a human should be allowed near Volanti royalty. I find this concerning. Yuna's face was calm, but her pattern flickered with anger. Lord Hyun-sik speaks out of turn. Do I? Hyun-sik smiled. It was not a kind smile. Perhaps the princess has forgotten the old laws. Perhaps she has been influenced by beings who do not understand our ways. He looked directly at Doyeon. Perhaps she should explain why a primitive creature stands at her side while noble Volanthi are kept at a distance. The silence in the room was absolute. Every eye was on Yuna. Some looked sympathetic. Most looked hungry for scandal. Du Hyun stood very still. He knew he should stay silent. He knew he should let Yuna handle this. He was just a human. He had no right to speak in this assembly, but Hyun-sik was not finished. The princess's judgment has always been questionable, he continued. She isolates herself from the court. She refuses suitable matches. And now she surrounds herself with aliens who cannot control their feelings. He shook his head in mock sadness. It is no wonder that some question whether she is fit for her position. Yuna's hands were trembling. The patterns on her skin were flashing wildly. She opened her mouth to respond, but the words would not come. Doyeon stepped forward. Forgive me, he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the silent room. I am only a human. I do not understand all your customs. But where I come from, we judge people by their actions, not their bloodlines. Hyun-sik's eyes narrowed. The human speaks without permission. Yes, and I will accept any punishment for that later. Do-hyun met the old noble's gaze without flinching. But first, let me say this. I have watched Princess Yuna for weeks now. I have seen how she treats everyone with respect, even those who insult her. I have seen how she works to understand other species, even when they dismiss her as cold and unfeeling. I have seen her courage when assassins tried to take her life. He turned to face the assembled delegates. Every action I have seen from Princess Yuna has been worthy of respect. She is kind when kindness is difficult. She is patient when patience is rare. She thinks of others before herself. He looked back at Hyun-sik. I cannot speak for Volanti traditions, but I know honor when I see it. And Princess Yuna has more honor than anyone in this room. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then, something strange happened. The patterns on Yuna's skin began to glow. Not the flickering anger from before. Something different. Something deeper. A soft, steady light that spread across her face and hands like sunrise. Counselor Yunji gasped. She recognized that pattern. She had seen it described in texts that were thousands of years old. It was the pattern of choosing. The pattern that appeared when a Volante found their bondmate. Yuna did not notice. She was too busy staring at Dayan, her heart pounding, her mind reeling from what he had just done. But everyone else noticed. The room erupted in whispers. Hyunsik's face went pale with shock. Ambassador Jiwon covered her mouth with her hand. Something had changed. Something enormous. And nothing would ever be the same again. The news could not be contained. Within hours, everyone on the station knew. The Volante princess had shown the bonding pattern. She had shown it for a human. An untouchable royal had chosen a creature from Earth, a member of the youngest and most primitive species in the Concord. The reactions were immediate and extreme. The Volante court was in chaos. Nobles gathered in angry groups, demanding explanations. Some called for Yuna to be stripped of her title. Some demanded the human's immediate execution. Some simply could not believe what they had seen. Other species watched with fascination. The toHFY, who had always dismissed humans as weak, now looked at them with new curiosity. The Melthari, who communicated through colors, flashed patterns of surprise and confusion whenever they saw Do-Yun pass. And in the human delegation, Ambassador Jiwon was desperately trying to prevent a diplomatic disaster. "Do you understand what you have done?" She shouted at Dayan in her private office. "You have triggered a bonding response in Volante royalty. This has never happened with an alien before. The Volante consider their bloodline sacred. They will see this as contamination." Dayan stood before her, his face calm but tired. "I did not plan this, Ambassador. I only spoke the truth." "The truth?" Jiwon laughed bitterly. "The truth does not matter in diplomacy. Perception matters. And right now, the perception is that a human has somehow seduced a Volante princess through emotion manipulation. That is not what happened. It does not matter what happened. It matters what people believe." Jiwon sank into her chair. "The Volante Emperor has summoned you both. He is not happy. If he decides you are a threat, there is nothing I can do to save you." 1 hour later, Daehyun stood in the throne room of the Volante delegation. Emperor Taiho sat on a raised platform, his face like carved ice. Around him stood his advisors, his guards, and Lord Hyunsik, who watched everything with barely hidden satisfaction. Yuna stood beside Do-Hyun. She had refused to be separated from him. Her patterns were still glowing faintly, though she had learned to control them somewhat. "My daughter," the Emperor said, his voice cold. "Explain yourself." "There is nothing to explain, Father." Yuna's voice was steady. "I have done nothing wrong. You have shown the bonding pattern for an alien. For a human." Taiho spoke the word like a curse. "Do you understand what this means?" "I understand that I cannot control what I feel. Our gifts show us truth, Father." "Is that not what you taught me?" "The truth is that this human saved my life. The truth is that his mind is more honest than any I have ever touched. The truth is that his heart is worthy of respect." "His heart is primitive," Hyunsik interrupted. "He has manipulated you somehow. Humans are known for their emotional tricks." Yuna turned to face the old noble. Her patterns flared. "You know nothing about humans? You have never touched one. You have never felt what they feel. You speak from ignorance and hatred." "Enough," Taiho commanded. The room fell silent. The Emperor looked at his daughter for a long moment. "You will control yourself. You will suppress this bonding response. You will never touch this human again. And if I refuse? Then you will be exiled, stripped of your title, cast out from the Volanti forever. Taiho's voice was flat. Final. This is not a request, daughter. This is an order. Yuna stared at her father. Do-hyun watched her face, saw the conflict there. She was being asked to choose between her family and her heart, between duty and truth. He knew what he should do. Your Majesty, he said, stepping forward. I will leave. Yuna spun toward him. No, Princess, please. Do-hyun kept his voice calm. I am nobody. I have no family, no position, no importance. You are royalty. You have responsibilities to billions of people. I am not worth destroying your life over. Do not tell me what you are worth, she said fiercely. I have touched your mind. I know exactly what you are worth. Then you know I am serious. I care about you. That is why I have to leave. I will not be the reason you lose everything. Yuna's eyes were bright with tears. The patterns on her skin pulsed with emotion. And what about what I want? Does that matter? Of course it matters. But sometimes we have to give up what we want to protect the people we care about. He smiled sadly. You taught me that. When you stopped the guards from killing me. When you put yourself between me and your father's anger. You protected me, even though it cost you. He reached out and touched her face, very gently. The guards tensed, but no one moved. Let me protect you now, he whispered. Let me go. Yuna closed her eyes. A single tear ran down her cheek. For a moment, she leaned into his touch. Then she pulled away. No, she said. Her voice was different now. Harder. Stronger. No, I will not let fear decide my future. I will not let politics destroy the first real thing I have ever felt. She turned to face her father. You taught me that our gift shows us truth. Well, I have found truth. This human has more honor than half your court. His mind is pure where others are poisoned with lies. His heart is open where others are locked behind walls of greed and ambition. She straightened her spine. If loving him makes me unworthy of being Volanti, then perhaps I never wanted to be Volanti in the first place. The room exploded in chaos. Nobles shouted. Guards moved forward. Emperor Taiho rose from his throne, his face dark with fury. But before anyone could act, Hyunsik made his move. Enough of this madness, he declared. I have proof that this human is not what he seems. He produced a datapad. My agents have uncovered evidence that Kang Do-hyun is actually a spy. He was planted in the diplomatic corps specifically to infiltrate Volanti leadership. This whole affair, the assassination attempt, the touching, the bonding, all of it was a human plot to destabilize our empire. The room went silent. Do-hyun felt the blood drain from his face. That is a lie, is it? Hyunsik smiled coldly. The evidence speaks for itself. Communications with human intelligence. Secret meetings with military officials. A history carefully constructed to place him near important targets. He turned to the emperor. Your Majesty, I recommend immediate execution. This human is a threat to everything we hold sacred. Emperor Taiho looked at the evidence. His face was unreadable. Finally, he spoke. Take the human to detention. He will be tried tomorrow. Father, no. Yuna rushed forward, but guards blocked her path. This is false evidence. Hyunsik is lying. Then the trial will prove it. Taiho's voice was final. Until then, the human stays in custody. And you, daughter, will stay in your chambers. Under guard. Do-hyun did not resist as the guards took him. He kept his eyes on Yuna as they dragged him away. She was fighting against the guards who held her, her patterns blazing with fury and despair. I will not let them take you, she shouted. Do you hear me? I will not let them. But the doors closed between them. In his cell, Do-hyun sat on the cold floor and prepared to die. He was not angry. The evidence was false, but he could not prove it. Hyun-sik had planned this carefully. The trial would be a performance. The verdict was already decided. At least Yuna would survive. That was something. She would mourn him, perhaps, but she would live. She would find someone else eventually. Someone worthy of her. He closed his eyes and thought about her face. Her silver eyes. The way her patterns flickered when she laughed. The warmth of her touch on his hand. For a few weeks, he had felt something real. Something worth living for. That was more than many people got in an entire lifetime. He should be grateful. The door opened. Yuna stood there, alone. Her guards were unconscious on the floor behind her. Her patterns were blazing like stars. "Get up," she said. "We are leaving." "Princess, you cannot do this. Your father will never forgive you. I do not care." She grabbed his hand and pulled him to his feet. "I have spent my entire life doing what others expected. Being what others wanted. I am done with that." She met his eyes. "You are the only real thing I have ever found. I am not losing you. They will hunt us. Let them try. You will lose everything." She smiled. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "I have already found everything. Everything I ever wanted. And it is standing right in front of me." She pulled him into the corridor. They ran together, hand in hand, into an uncertain future. Behind them, alarms began to sound. The alarm screamed through the station as Do-hyun and Yuna ran through corridors of steel and light. Guards were everywhere. Announcements echoed off the walls. The princess of the Volanthi and the human spy were fleeing. All personnel were ordered to stop them. Do-hyun's lungs burned. Yuna's hand was tight in his. He did not know where they were going. He did not know if escape was even possible. But he ran anyway, because she was beside him, and that was enough. They turned a corner and stopped. Hyun-sik stood in their path. Behind him were a dozen guards, weapons raised. Behind the guards were representatives from several alien species, watching with cold curiosity. "The princess and her pet," Hyun-sik said. His voice was calm, almost amused. "How touching. Running away together like characters in a human fairy tale." Yuna stepped forward, putting herself between Do-hyun and the guards. "Let us pass, Hyun-sik. This has nothing to do with you. On the contrary, it has everything to do with me." Hyun-sik smiled. "When your father disowns you, when your family falls from favor, someone will need to restore order. Someone strong. Someone who understands that aliens like humans can never be trusted. You manufactured the evidence against Do-hyun." "Of course I did. It was easy. Humans are so predictable, so emotional, so desperate to be liked. One smile from a princess, and this fool was ready to die for you." Hyun-sik shook his head. "That is not strength. That is weakness. And weakness has no place in the Volanthi Empire." Do-hyun felt something cold settle in his chest. Not fear. Anger. Pure, quiet anger. He stepped forward, standing beside Yuna. "You are wrong," he said. Hyun-sik raised an eyebrow. "The spy speaks. I am not a spy. But that does not matter. You have already decided what I am. You decided the moment you saw me. Human, primitive, unworthy." Do-hyun met the noble's eyes without flinching. "You think emotions make us weak. You think feeling deeply means we cannot think clearly. But you are wrong, am I?" "Yes, because feeling deeply means we know what matters. It means we know what is worth fighting for, worth dying for." He looked at Yuna. "Worth living for." He turned back to Hyun-sik. "I have nothing. No family. No home. No power. By your standards, I am worth less than nothing. But I saved your princess's life. Not because of politics. Not because of ambition. Simply because it was the right thing to do. He spread his hands. Can you say the same? Have you ever done anything in your entire life simply because it was right? Hyunsik's face twisted with rage. You dare lecture me? A creature whose species learned to make fire only a few thousand years ago? I dare because I have nothing to lose. And because I know something you do not. What could you possibly know that I do not? A new voice answered from behind the crowd. He knows that you are a traitor. The crowd parted. Admiral Sujin Park strode forward, flanked by human marines in full combat armor. Behind them came loyal Volanti guards, weapons drawn. Hyunsik's face went pale. What is the meaning of this? The meaning is simple. Admiral Park held up a datapad. For the past 3 months, human intelligence has been monitoring unusual communications from this station. Someone was selling Concord's secrets to the Outer Kingdoms. Someone was planning to destabilize the alliance and profit from the chaos that followed. She stepped closer to Hyunsik. We could not prove who it was. The spy was too careful. But then something unexpected happened. A human touched a Volanti princess, and suddenly everyone was focused on the scandal. She smiled coldly. Including you. You moved too quickly, Hyunsik. You were so eager to destroy the human that you got sloppy. Your communications were intercepted. Your conspiracy exposed. She turned to the assembled aliens. Lord Hyunsik has been working with the Outer Kingdoms for years. He planned to disgrace Princess Yuna, weaken Emperor Tayo, and eventually seize control of the Volanti court. The assassination attempt was his doing. The false evidence against Do-hyun was his doing. All of it was part of his plan. The room erupted in chaos. Guards seized Hyunsik. Nobles shouted accusations. The other species whispered urgently among themselves. Through it all, Do-hyun stood very still. It was over. They had won, but the victory felt hollow. He looked at Yuna. Her face was pale. Her patterns were dim. What happens now? She whispered. Emperor Taeho arrived an hour later. He stood in the central plaza of the station, surrounded by delegates from all 12 species. His face was like stone. His patterns were perfectly still. Yuna and Do-hyun stood before him. My daughter, the emperor said. You defied my orders. You attacked your guards. You fled with a human. Yes, Yuna said simply. And yet, it seems you were right. About Hyunsik. About the conspiracy. Taeho's jaw tightened. Perhaps about other things as well. He turned to Do-hyun. Human, you were accused of crimes you did not commit. You were imprisoned, threatened with death. And still you tried to protect my daughter. You offered to leave so that she would not be harmed. Do-hyun said nothing. There was nothing to say. Our laws forbid touching royalty. But our laws also demand justice. You saved the princess's life. You exposed a traitor. You acted with honor when no one expected it from you. The emperor paused. Perhaps our laws need to change. He extended his hand. The entire plaza went silent. The emperor of the Volanthi, offering his hand to a human. It was unprecedented. Impossible. Do-hyun hesitated. Then he reached out and took it. Through the touch, he felt the emperor's emotions. Surprise, respect, and something else. Something small but real. Hope. Taeho released his hand and turned to the assembly. For centuries, we have judged other species by our own standards. We have called humans primitive because they feel deeply. We have dismissed their emotions as weakness. He looked at his daughter, then at Do-hyun. But perhaps we were wrong. Perhaps their ability to feel is not weakness. Perhaps it is strength. Perhaps it is something we have lost, something we need to remember. He stepped back. The Volanthi Empire proposes a new cultural exchange program. Humans will teach us to feel. And perhaps we will teach them to understand. He almost smiled. My daughter will lead this program, with her chosen partner at her side. 1 year later, toHFY stood on the observation deck of a new station, watching the stars. So much had changed. The exchange program was thriving. Humans and Volanti worked together daily. Other species were beginning to follow their example, and he was no longer alone. Yuna appeared beside him, her hand finding his. Her patterns glowed soft gold, the color of contentment. What are you thinking about? She asked. Everything. Nothing. He smiled. I keep waiting to wake up. This still feels like a dream. It is not a dream. She leaned against him. It is real. You are real. We are real. He put his arm around her. You know, she said, my people spent centuries building walls to protect ourselves from feeling too much. We were so afraid of emotions that we forgot what they were for. What are they for? Connection, love, purpose. She looked up at him. All the things you showed me in 3 seconds of contact. All the things I never knew I was missing. She touched his face. My people are slowly learning to feel again. It is difficult for them. Sometimes painful. But they are trying. She smiled. And it all started because a human crashed through all our walls in 3 seconds. toHFY laughed softly. I did not mean to crash anything. I was just trying to save you. I know. That is what makes it so human. Her patterns flickered with affection. You did not think about politics or consequences. You just saw someone in danger and acted. That is the most human thing in the universe. They stood together in silence, watching the stars. Across the galaxy, change was spreading slowly. Other species were beginning to see humans differently, not as primitives who could not control their emotions, but as bridges, connectors, beings who could feel deeply enough to reach across any divide. It would take time. It would take patience. It would take pain. But humans were good at those things. They broke, but they did not close. They fell, but they got up again. They kept going. No matter what, that was their gift to the universe. And it had started with 1 man, 1 princess. And 3 seconds of forbidden's touch. I love you. Yuna whispered. toHFY and pulled her closer. I love you too. Above them, the stars shone on, eternal and patient. Witnesses to the small miracle of 2 hearts that had somehow found each other across the vast emptiness of space. Perhaps that was the most human thing of all. Not the technology, not the ambition, not the drive to explore and conquer, just love. Simple, stubborn, impossible love.